We often refer to the Gospels as the good news. And yet if all we ever heard Jesus say was what we just heard the deacon proclaim from Jesus' own lips, we'd wonder, well, what's so good about that? Jesus was forecasting the destruction of the temple. The people were going to be dispersed. There are going to be earthquakes, famines, wars, plagues. They're going to be thrown into jail, handed over by their families, put before judges. Some are going to be killed. You'll be hated by all because of my name. Why would anybody want to sign on for that? And yet it's important for us to understand where we are in the timeline. This is the 21st chapter of Luke. In the next chapter, Jesus will be put on trial. The day after that, Jesus will be put on the cross. It's Holy Week. He's in Jerusalem. He's been making this journey to Jerusalem for his destiny, for his passion, for the Passover, for half of Luke's gospel. And even though he has only hours to live, Jesus' concern is not for himself. His concern is what's going to happen to those he leaves behind, because there's some difficult times on the horizon for him and for them. The destruction of the temple, well, that breaks Jesus' heart more than it does anybody else's, because there was nowhere on earth that Jesus felt closer to God the Father than in that temple. We found that out back when he was a child, much earlier in Luke's gospel. It's the fifth joyful mystery. Remember, it was Passover week. Mary and Joseph came with the whole village of Nazareth to the temple of Jerusalem for Passover. And they traveled in groups because there's security in numbers, and the kids were somewhere in the mix. Until on the way back to Nazareth, a day's journey from the big city, Mary and Joseph, as you recall, they can't find Jesus. Then it takes them a whole day to get back to Jerusalem, another day to find Jesus. He's only 12, and yet Mary and Joseph were far more scared and anxious than Jesus was. Mary goes up to him and says, "Son, why have you done this to us?" Jesus looks up at his mother with puzzlement, and he said, "Why are you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" Well, that put Mary and Joseph on notice. He was willing to live with them. He would be obedient to them, but his home was not with them in Nazareth. His home was the Father's house, the temple at Jerusalem. It had been destroyed before. It was built by Solomon, the son of David, 9 centuries BC. And yet when the Babylonians invaded Jerusalem, coming from Iraq in the east, they destroyed the temple, and they stole the Ark of the Covenant. And no matter what Indiana Jones says, it still has not been found. Jesus was standing in front of what was called the Second Temple. And that was very important for the Jewish faith. Why? Because there was nowhere else on the planet where they could fulfill the sacrifices and worship obliged them by Scripture. If that temple was taken from them, the practice of their faith would be forever unfulfilled. And Jesus just told them it's coming down. And that would happen 33 years after he died and rose from the dead. He dies in 33. In the year 66, there was the Jewish rebellion against the Roman Empire. By that point, after 103 years of Roman occupation, the Jewish people couldn't take it anymore. They lost their lives, their livelihood, all their wealth was headed to a far-off capital. The people were oppressed, they had no freedom, and so they said, "We truly have nothing to lose." And so they decided to poke the bear. Turned out not to be a very wise decision. Nero was the emperor in Rome at that time, and he sent the man who would be his successor, Vespasian, to take all his legions and to put down that rebellion. Well, they didn't just stop the attack. They destroyed Jerusalem. They did burn down and then rip down the temple. And then whoever they couldn't kill, they either took away as prisoners of war and enslaved them in other parts of the empire, but they dispersed all the Jews out of Judah. And it would stay that way for the better part of 2,000 years. What we know as Israel today has only existed since the end of the Second World War. Before that, it was Palestine, from the time the Romans kicked the Jewish people out until the time the newly formed United Nations put them back. When they were dispersed from the Holocaust from Europe after World War II, it was Palestine. This explains why the Palestinians think it's their ancestral land, and why, from a biblical sense, the Jewish people believe it's their ancestral land, and why they're willing to fight and die for every inch. But Jesus was right. There were bad things on the horizon. And it was going to get worse, because he said, "You will be hated by all because of my name." Jesus is God. He knows everything. He knew that for 300 years it would be a crime to be a Christian in the Roman Empire. And yet people were lining up to be baptized. Why is that? Because much like those Jewish people that rose up against Rome in the year 66, those people that left Judaism or paganism or some other Gentile religion to become a Christian, they were all living in occupied Roman provinces, and none of them were free. And they realized that earthly kings will only abuse the authority given to them, and they would rather serve a greater king and go on to a greater kingdom where the happiness there could never be taken from them. It was and is the hope of heaven that has been the strength of martyrs for 20 centuries. And yet we must know this. It's a newsflash for us, and you won't see it widely reported in the mainstream media. There's more Christians dying for the faith each day in 2025 than at any point in any place throughout these 20 Christian centuries. Indeed, in the last 100 years, more Christians died for their Christian faith than in the previous 19 centuries combined. Jesus' words are truer now than they were then. You will be hated by all because of my name. But why is this world so threatened by the gospel we preach? In the end, sadly, it's probably about power. That's why the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees wanted Jesus on that cross, because if he was God, then he was more powerful than them. If he was God, then he had a power that truly is out of this world, that trumps any of their earthly authorities. This world is always threatened by things that we cannot control. And Christians, we don't love this world. We're here, but the scripture tells us we are in exile, and we seek to be at home with the Lord. And that's the essence of Jesus' message there before he went out to the cross, telling them that bad things are on the horizon. He then tells them, don't live for that. Live for what's beyond the horizon, heaven. Prepare for heaven. Live for heaven here on earth. And though the storms may come, if we are anchored in the cross, then he who calms stormy seas will bring us to the safe harbors of heaven and happiness. And so we are in this world, we are not of this world, and we need to be careful how attached we are to this world, because as much as we love it, it can never love us back.